The window was already shattered. Coruscant's wind howled through the gaping hole in the Chancellor's office, carrying the faint screams of speeders banking away from the tower. Mace Windu stood at the edge, his amethyst blade angled downward at the crumpled figure of Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, Darth Sidious, who writhed on the floor, his face a ruin of molten flesh and sunken yellow eyes. Lightning still flickered between his gnarled fingers. Weak now, desperate.
"I have the power to save the one you love,"
Palpatine rasped. His gaze slid past Windu to the doorway, where Anakin Skywalker stood frozen, lightsaber unignited. Windu didn't look back. He's too dangerous to be left alive. Anakin's mind cracked open. Padme, the dreams, the death, the only man who'd ever promised him a way out, seconds from execution, and the Jedi Master who would kill that promise without hesitation. But something else surfaced, colder, a clarity born of years being pulled between light and dark. Palpatine had manipulated him, orchestrated a war, murdered Jedi by proxy, and Windu had never trusted him, never wanted him on the council, and now stood ready to execute an unarmed man without trial. Anakin ignited his blade. He moved before Windu could register the sound. The blue saber came down in a diagonal arc, not across Windu's hand, not to deflect, but through. Mace Windu, master of Vapad, never saw it coming. The blade carved through his torso before he could pivot, and his body crumpled forward, his violet saber clattering and extinguishing against the ruined floor. Palpatine's lips peeled back into a grin.
"I knew you."
Anakin's backswing silenced him. The blue blade punched through the Chancellor's chest and pinned him to the floor for one suspended second. The lightning died. The yellow eyes went vacant. Darth Sidious, the phantom menace who had puppeteered the galaxy for a generation, slumped and was still. Anakin stood between two bodies. His lightsaber hissed as he deactivated it, and the only sound left was the wind and his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. No one was coming. Not yet. Palpatine had dismissed his Red Guards before the confrontation, and the office's blast doors had sealed when the fighting started. Kit Fisto, Aegon Kolar, and Saesee Tiin lay where Sidious had cut them down in the first brutal seconds of the fight. There were no witnesses. Anakin moved before his guilt could catch up. He pried Windu's violet saber from the dead master's grip and placed it beside Palpatine, angled just so, as if Windu had already dropped it after delivering the killing blow. He propped Windu against the desk in a half-collapsed posture, suggesting a man who had struck and then fallen from his own wounds. Then, he keyed his comlink and contacted the Jedi Temple. "Master Windu has fallen. The Chancellor was the Sith." I arrived too late. By the time the Senate guards forced the blast doors open 20 minutes later, Anakin Skywalker was already kneeling beside the bodies, his face streaked with tears that were not entirely false. He owned the scene from 1 minute, and for the first time in his life, he stood entirely, terrifyingly alone. Enjoying our alternative Star Wars universe? Consider liking and hitting the hype button to show us your support. Don't forget to subscribe for more mind-bending tales from the Star Wars universe. Across the galaxy, Yoda sat in meditation aboard a Republic cruiser above Kashyyyk. The disturbance hit him like a shockwave. Two presences in the Force, one impossibly dark, one blazingly bright, snuffed out in rapid succession. He reached out. He could not find Mace Windu. He could not find the dark presence he had long suspected lurked within the Senate. What he found instead was Anakin Skywalker, burning, conflicted, radiating a fear so acute it bordered on anguish. On Utapau, Obi-Wan Kenobi had just watched General Grievous collapse in a heap of burning cybernetics. He reclaimed his lightsaber and signaled Commander Cody for extraction. The war on this front was over. But as the gunship doors closed, Obi-Wan felt something cold settle in his chest, a whisper through the Force he couldn't interpret. At the Senate building, Anakin held the cordon together with sheer force of will. Every responder who arrived was funneled through his version of events first. The story he sold was elegant. The Jedi had confronted the Chancellor after discovering his identity. The duel had been catastrophic. Windu had struck the killing blow but succumbed to his injuries. and Anakin had arrived too late to intervene. He delivered the account first to the Jedi Temple, his voice tight with manufactured grief. Then to Bail Organa, who reached the tower within the hour. Organa studied his face the way a politician reads for cracks, and found nothing he could name. When Obi-Wan's cruiser arrived back on Coruscant 2 days later, Anakin met him on the landing platform. The embrace was real, the guilt behind it, suffocating. "You're certain?" Obi-Wan asked. "Palpatine was the Sith Lord." "Mace confirmed it before they engaged," Anakin said. "By the time I got there," he let the sentence collapse, and Obi-Wan filled the silence with sympathy. The council convened. What remained of it? Yoda, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Plo Koon, Shaak Ti. The chairs of the fallen sat empty. Yoda spoke slowly, each word measured.
Revealed, the Sith Lord was. Destroyed, he has been. But settled, nothing is.
He was right. The Sith were dead. Both master and apprentice, Sidious and the already fallen Dooku. But the Republic was a body without a head, and the war still raged on a dozen fronts. Padme Amidala stood in the Senate rotunda and watched democracy begin to eat itself. The emergency session convened within 48 hours of Palpatine's death and devolved into factional shouting within minutes. 14 years of consolidated executive power had hollowed out the Senate's ability to function independently. Mas Amedda attempted to assert interim authority, but his proximity to Palpatine made him politically radioactive. The delegation of 2,000, the petition Padme and Bail Organa had quietly assembled to oppose Palpatine's overreach, suddenly found itself without an adversary. Padme saw the vacuum for what it was. Core world senators demanded immediate elections. Outer Rim representatives, systems still under bombardment, demanded military continuity first. Mon Mothma urged patience. Bail urged coalition. Padme, 8 months pregnant, stepped into the gap. She proposed a transitional council, 5 senators, rotating chair, 60-day mandate to stabilize governance and schedule elections. The motion passed by a narrow margin, and for the first time in over a decade, the Republic's future wasn't resting in a single pair of hands. But Padme knew what no one else in that chamber did. Her husband had been in that office. She hadn't asked him directly. She didn't need to. She had seen the way his hands trembled when he spoke about that night, the way his eyes drifted to a middle distance she couldn't reach. The man who came home to her that night was not the man who had left. On the battlefields of Felucia, Megiddo, Selukami, and a dozen other contested worlds, the Grand Army of the Republic waited. Commander Cody had received no special orders. Commander Bly continued to follow Aayla Secura's directives on Felucia. Commander Rex, stationed with Ahsoka Tano during the Siege of Mandalore, carried out his mission as instructed. The inhibitor chips embedded in every clone trooper's brain sat dormant, biological switches waiting for a signal that would never arrive. None of them understood that a single encrypted command from a now-dead Chancellor would have turned them into executioners overnight. But the question remained, what do you do with 3 million soldiers bred for a war that's ending? The Jedi Council debated it behind closed doors. Ki-Adi-Mundi argued for a phased demobilization. Plo Koon pushed for full citizenship rights. Shaak Ti warned that accelerated aging gave them perhaps 20 good years. Any plan had to account for that biological clock. Yoda listened, but said little. The clone army had been commissioned in secret, grown in the dark, and delivered to the Jedi like a gift they never questioned hard enough. Sifo Dyas's original order, co-opted by Dooku, funded by Sidious. Every clone carried the fingerprints of the enemy, not in their loyalty, which was genuine, but in their very existence. None of it mattered to Anakin. Not the Senate's collapse, not the clone question, not the war's dying spasms. There was only Padme. The visions hadn't stopped. Every night, the same nightmare. Her face twisted in agony, the sound of a child crying, then silence so complete it felt like the Force itself had gone deaf. Palpatine was dead. The one being who had promised Anakin the power to cheat death was gone, killed by Anakin's own hand. The irony was a blade lodged between his ribs. He began searching the Jedi archives, not the public stacks, the restricted vaults, the holocrons sealed behind ray shields and biometric locks. He had no formal clearance for those deaths. His council seat had died with Palpatine's appointment, and the new interim council had quietly never reconfirmed it. But the temple in those weeks was a wounded place. Half its masters were dead or deployed. Security protocols had loosened in the chaos, and Anakin was still the hero with no fear. He came at odd hours, when Jocasta Nu was off shift, and used override codes that had never been revoked to slip past locks that should have stopped him cold. Inside, he found fragments, force healing techniques, midichlorian manipulation, ancient writings on the boundary between life and death. Tantalizing, incomplete, but nothing useful. He went deeper, searched for records on Darth Plagueis, the Sith Lord Palpatine had spoken of. The archives held almost nothing, just a name, a footnote. Whatever knowledge Plagueis had possessed had died with him, and then died again with Sidious. Anakin was chasing a ghost of a ghost. The obsession consumed him. He withdrew from council meetings, stopped visiting Padme's apartment, deflected Obi-Wan's check-ins with vague excuses. In that widening gap, something darker took root. Not the dark side, not exactly, but a cold pragmatism that looked remarkably similar. If the Jedi's knowledge couldn't save Padme, then perhaps the Jedi themselves were the obstacle. Obi-Wan didn't sleep well anymore. Something in Anakin's account didn't fit, and it nagged at him the way a misaligned hyperdrive nags at a mechanic. Not enough to trigger an alarm, but enough to keep you from trusting the ship. He returned to Palpatine's office. The scene had been cleaned, the window repaired, but the Force remembered. Obi-Wan knelt and opened himself to it. He felt Windu's righteous fury, Palpatine's corrosive malice, the brief flares of Fisto, Kolar, and Tin being extinguished. And underneath it all, like a bass line in a symphony of violence, he felt Anakin, not arriving late, not finding bodies, present, active, his blade ignited, not in defense, but in decision. Obi-Wan sat with that knowledge for 3 days before he spoke to Yoda. The Grand Master's reaction was not surprise. It was sorrow.
Sensed it. I did.
Yoda said quietly.
Hoped I was wrong. I did.
What do we do? Yoda closed his eyes.
No, we must what he has become. Before act, we can.
The war ended not with a bang, but with a slow, exhausted without Sidious coordinating strategy, without Dooku, without Grievous commanding the droid armies, the Confederacy simply fell apart. The corporate backers, the Trade Federation, the Banking Clan, the Techno Union, scrambled for amnesty deals. The Separatist Council, hiding on Mustafar, found themselves waiting for a savior who would never arrive. Sidious had planned to send his new apprentice to eliminate them, but that apprentice had never been born. Newt Gunray, Wat Tambor, Poggle the Lesser, and the rest eventually surrendered, trading information for leniency. It shouldn't have felt like victory. It didn't. The Separatist legitimate grievances, corporate exploitation, core world neglect, senatorial corruption, remained unaddressed. The war had been a symptom, and the disease was still there. The question that consumed Coruscant in the weeks that followed was deceptively simple. Who governs now? Padme's Transitional Council had nominal authority but lacked enforcement power. The judiciary had been gutted by Palpatine's wartime reform. Into this vacuum, competing visions emerged. Mon Mothma and Bail Organa advocated for constitutional restoration, a full rollback of emergency powers, new elections, a return to the pre-war republic, principled and entirely impractical in the short term. Symptoms still reeling from separatist occupation needed governance, not campaign cycles. And then, there were the Jedi. Ki-Adi-Mundi proposed, cautiously, that the Order assume temporary stewardship over key governmental functions. Not rule, he insisted. Guidance. The distinction mattered to the Jedi. It did not matter at all to the senators who saw exactly what it looked like. A religious order with a private army offering to run the government. Anakin backed the Jedi proposal. He spoke before the council with an intensity that made Obi-Wan's stomach tighten. The Republic was fractured. The Senate was paralyzed. The Jedi were the only institution with the moral authority and the military capability to hold things together. His logic was sound. His reasoning was airtight. And beneath every word, Obi-Wan heard the real argument. If the Jedi controlled the Republic, Anakin could access whatever resources he needed to save Padme. It was never about governance. It was about leverage. Padme, watching from the Senate gallery, recognized the rhetoric for what it was. She'd heard it before, from Palpatine. Different mouths, different motives, same trajectory. The man she loved was making the case for benevolent authoritarianism, and he didn't even realize it. Obi-Wan found Anakin in the temple archives at 3 in the morning, surrounded by holocrons, his eyes bloodshot. "You look exhausted." "I'm fine." "You're not." Obi-Wan sat across from him. "I went back to the Chancellor's office. I felt what happened there." Silence. When Anakin spoke, his voice was flat. "Then you know I did what had to be done." "You killed Mace Windu." "I killed a man about to execute a prisoner. Isn't that what we're supposed to prevent?" "You didn't end anything," Obi-Wan said. "You replaced one kind of chaos with another. And now, you're searching for power the Jedi warned against, pushing for political authority you have no right to, and lying to everyone who trusts you." His voice cracked, including me. Anakin stood. The holocrons rattled. "You don't understand. Padme is going to die, Obi-Wan. I've seen it, the same way I saw my mother die, and I will not stand by and let it happen again." "And what happens when you've saved her?" Obi-Wan asked quietly. "When the next crisis comes, and you decide again that the rules don't apply to you, when does it stop?" "It stops when the people I love are safe." Obi-Wan rose. His hand rested on his lightsaber, not gripping, just touching. Anakin's blade ignited before the sentence finished. They fought in the heart of the Jedi Temple, not on a volcanic hellscape above molten lava, but in the halls where Anakin had trained as a boy, where he'd first held the lightsaber, where he'd been told that fear was the path to the dark side. Symbolism was lost on neither of them. Anakin fought with everything. Gems so power strokes that cracked the marble floor. Force pushes that sent statues toppling from their alcoves. He was stronger than Obi-Wan. He was always stronger. But Obi-Wan was Ceresu, the patient, the immovable, the wall that bends but never breaks. The duel spilled through the corridors, past the room of 1,000 fountains, through training cells where younglings had practiced hours earlier. The temple was emptier than it should have been. Half its masters dead in the war. Half its knights still deployed across the outer rims. Yoda felt the duel from across the temple and bowed his head. Through the Force, he commanded the few knights who came running to stand down. "Intervene not. This fight is not yours." They obeyed, because he was Yoda, and because some part of them already understood what was happening. Anakin pressed the attack. He was relentless, channeling every ounce of fear and grief and guilt into his blade. But Obi-Wan had seen this before. On Geonosis, in the skies above Coruscant, in 1,000 sparring sessions where Anakin's aggression outpaced his discipline. Obi-Wan waited. He absorbed. And when Anakin overextended on a savage downward strike, Obi-Wan sidestepped, redirected, and brought his blade up in a tight arc that severed Anakin's weapon at the emitter. The broken hilt clattered to the floor. Anakin stood, disarmed, breathing hard, his eyes wild. Not yellow, not Sith gold, but something worse. Clear, aware. He knew exactly what he'd done and why. He'd do it all again. Obi-Wan held his blade at Anakin's throat. His hand trembled. Every instinct told him what this moment demanded, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't kill Anakin Skywalker. And he understood, with a clarity that made his stomach turn, that handing Anakin to the Council meant a public trial, a public execution, and a story that would shatter what little faith the galaxy had left in the Jedi. It meant Padme learning every detail. It meant Luke and Leia someday growing up knowing exactly what their father had done. So, Obi-Wan made his own choice, one he would carry to his grave. "You're dead," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "As far as the Order is concerned, as far as Padme is concerned, Anakin Skywalker died in this temple tonight, killed by the same conspiracy that took the others. In exchange, you vanish. Outer Rim. Wild space. Somewhere even the Force has trouble reaching. You never contact Padme. You never seek your children. You never wear that name again." For a long moment, Obi-Wan thought Anakin might force him to finish it. Then, something in his old friend's eyes broke. He understood the bargain. He understood it was the only mercy left in the galaxy, and that it was being offered by the only man who had ever truly known him. He looked at Obi-Wan one last time, carrying the weight of every mission, every joke, every moment of trust between them, then turned and walked into the Coruscant night. Yoda would later confirm Obi-Wan's account to the Council without comment. The Grand Master's eyes, when he did, were very old and very tired. Padme Amidala gave birth to twins 3 weeks later. Luke and Leia came into the galaxy screaming, healthy, and entirely unaware of the father who wasn't there to hold them. The visions had been wrong. Or perhaps, without the dark side's corruption driving events toward their worst conclusion, the future had simply changed. Padme survived. She named Bail Organa and Obi-Wan Kenobi as godparents, and she threw herself into rebuilding the Republic with the ferocity of a woman who had almost lost everything. The Jedi Order retreated. Yoda stepped down from the Council, citing age and failure in equal measure. The Order's new leadership began rethinking what it meant to serve the Force without trying to control it. The clone army was gradually decommissioned. Its soldiers offered land, citizenship, and the dignity of names instead of numbers. The galaxy entered an uneasy peace. No empire rose, no Death Star was built, no rebellion was necessary. At least, not yet. The Republic limped forward, carrying the scars of a war it barely understood and a betrayal it would never fully know about. And somewhere in the Outer Rim, Anakin Skywalker sat alone. No Vader suit encased him. No Emperor commanded him. He was just a man, talented, broken, haunted by the knowledge that he held the galaxy's fate in his hands and crushed it trying to save one person. He reached out through the Force and felt, faintly, 2 new presences, small, bright, impossibly pure, his children. He would never hold them. He would never teach them to fly. He would never hear them call his name. The Chosen One had brought balance to the Force, not through prophecy, not through destiny, but through the most human act imaginable. He had made a choice, and he had been wrong, and now he lived with it. For the first time, the galaxy feared not the Sith, not the Empire, not a masked enforcer in black armor. It feared what happened when the most powerful man alive answers to no one, not even himself. If you enjoyed this journey into an alternative Star Wars universe where destiny takes unexpected turns and balance means something entirely different, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We explore the infinite possibilities hidden within the galaxy far, far away, asking the questions that reshape everything you thought you knew. The Force has many paths. Come discover them with us.